Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Interesting show lined up for you today. I think you're going to find it really interesting and maybe even perhaps a little worrying as well. Today we're discussing cybersecurity and the upcoming General Data Protection Regulation. Now joining me in the studio today is Mike Osborne. He's the Executive Chairman at Data Barracks, and we're going to be talking about cybersecurity with him. And Linda Bazant from GDPR Consultant is going to be talking about GDPR in general. Mike, Linda, lovely to have you both with us. Mike, let's kick off first of all with you and just really get to the crux of this. Cybersecurity, there's a lot of scaremongering going on at the moment. Is it truly as serious a situation as maybe the press and the media are leading us to believe?
I think when you look at the facts, it is. So let me just tout some of the facts for you. The research shows that between now and 2020, the estimated loss per annum of cyber-related crime would be $1 trillion per year. In this last 12 months, the government has launched a national cyber security function, investing £1.9 billion into fighting cyber crime. So I think when you look at the sort of volumes involved there in terms of investment from a government to try and halt the effect of it, but also the potential losses faced by business, they are just huge numbers.
When we talk about cybercrime in general, is it that what we're doing, we're bringing bad habits from home into our workplace and then using those bad habits maybe for passwords and things like that? Is that the kind of cybercrime we're talking about? Or is it bigger and deeper than that?
It's bigger and deeper because as individuals, we're consumers and we're employees. And the thing about cybercrime, with the way that all of us now use so many digital devices, your iPhone, your tablet, your laptop, your PC, anything that you do that is connected into networks creates an opportunity for cyber criminals to do their work.
Let's just explore this a little bit. When we're talking about the whole area of cybercrime, we hear figures bandied around about the loss that it is to industry, but when we talk about cybercrime, what are we actually talking about? Are we talking about the theft of data? Are we talking about the corruption of data? Are we talking about people, for instance, National Health Service just recently been held to ransom? Is that what we are talking about, or is it all of that?
It's all of that and more, of course. I think the thing about cybercrime is there are so many different aspects to it. There are those that we know about, that we see reported, but there's also those that go undetected. So, for example, we used to have ethical hackers that were trying to evidence how easy it was to get at data. And they would effectively shame organisations to say, look, these are supposed to be looking after your sensitive data, and look at what we've been able to do. There was no real crime involved. They weren't trying to sell that data or to manipulate that data.
They were showing off.
They were showing off, but they wanted also to highlight the fact that organisations weren't safe. Now, we're increasingly moving to what people call a digital economy, where pretty much everything that we do is based upon our applications on our iPhone or easy connectivity via the internet, the use of so-called cloud technology. And the real challenge for business is, if you want to be operational in the digital economy, you've got to be trusted. If I'm going to pay for something on your online website, or if I'm going to use an application that you've asked me to use, and I've got my name, address, telephone number, and my credit card details in there, only if I think it's safe am I going to use that service. So the willingness of the ethical hackers to shame organisations, it really could be very damaging for them if their reputation as being a safe organisation to do business with is hit by some form of public shaming.
How does that fit in, Linda, with the General Data Protection Regulation, which is just around the corner? We're hearing a lot about that in the news. Are they both connected? Is it both the same issues that they're trying to combat, or is it two different areas of the same problem?
It's the same areas that they're trying to combat. And of course, the fines that are being levied at the moment are up to £500,000. But once the GDPR comes in on the 25th of May, that will go up to between 10 and 20 million euro.
And what would you be fined for?
Actual data breach. So, for example, there are different levels of breach. So you may find that someone has taken with them a list of names and lost it on the train. And it is just a list of names. There's no other identifiable information on there. That's a minor breach. But if they've gone off with a list of names that has their bank account numbers on it, their email addresses, sort codes, credit card numbers, that's a huge breach, and that needs to be reported straight away. That's a very serious breach.
Mike, do you feel that businesses are aware of this? I've seen programs where it does feel very much like there is the frightening game is going on. I know the Information Commissioner's Office has actually said that there are organisations out there that are trying to panic people into doing different procedures or consultancy or whatever. So, but are we in a situation where it is all going to get a little bit out of hand?
So I think with any trend that associates itself with a crime or a challenge, I'm old enough to remember the Millennium Bug, if you remember, where the programmes were doubted as to whether or not planes would fall out of the sky if the clock went to the year 2000 and so on. So, I think with anything like this, there are always those organisations that are going to try and jump on the bandwagon. But I was recently reading that there's an estimated 100 billion emails that have been sent with some form of cyber-related crime intent, ransomware, phishing, etc., which I'll talk about a little bit later on. When the government launched the National Cyber Security Centre, their chief exec talked about Cybergeddon, where all of a sudden you've got states that are trying to hack states. And of course, with the American elections, you've got the whole issue of whether or not the elections were being impacted as a consequence of cyber crime. So, I do think it's a serious issue. All of the research from lots of different independent parties, including government rather than people with a particular interest in getting the right answer, suggests that typically 9 out of 10 of organisations have had some sort of cyber crime over the last 12 months or so. So, it really is a pandemic of crime. I think because
is it because we have left legacy systems in place so that really our security systems that we're using in industry today is the security systems of 10 years ago?
I think there's an element of that where if you haven't got up-to-date technology, if you haven't patched your operating systems, all of these things create an opening to some very clever people now that are constantly trying to find a way. And I would liken it to a modern arms race. On the one hand, you've got governance and you've got cyber protection firms really working as hard as they can to close all the gaps. And then you've got an equal and opposite amount of people desperately trying to find a way to penetrate them. And that's because at $1 trillion, that's an enormous prize for people to end up with if they succeed.
Where does the responsibility lie? Cyber barracks, for those people that haven't heard of them, who are cyber barracks?
So data barracks. That's okay. Maybe I should register a new name.
Yeah. I'll beat you to it. All right then. So data barracks then. So
with data barracks, we've traditionally been passionate about protecting data. So originally starting up on taking valid backups on a nightly basis on behalf of people. Now, over the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen a steady increase on the number of clients that are coming to recover their data, not because their computer's gone down or a disk drive has failed, but because they've been hit by some form of cyber attack. And with the data being compromised in their main systems, they're having to go back to a full recovery to the point where they've got clean data to then be able to carry on working again. So with Data Barracks, we're helping people understand the cyber threat, helping their staff with cyber awareness, and then providing a technology solution to help them through it.
Where does that put organisations in the like Data Barracks? Because where does the buck stop? That's what I'm thinking. If they're doing the backup for large multinational organisations, say their data that has been backed up is now corrupt or infected or whatever, where's the responsibility lie? Is it in the fact that the company who backed their data up got it wrong and their information's gone corrupt, or is it Data Barracks who are now in a situation where they are in breach?
Well, companies will have a responsibility when they're actually hiring a company like Data Barracks to make absolutely certain that everything that they have got is completely secure, and that will be dealt with in the agreements, because obviously that's third-party data. That's the data that they've collected from people that they are passing on to a third-party Data Barracks. So it's the company's responsibility to make sure that Data Barracks are as secure as they say.
Will it be a case at a later date that both a company like Data Barracks or somebody else, both of them are actually responsibility for the validity of that data?
Yes. Yes, they will be.
Yeah, and under the General Data Protection Regulation, you have operators, in terms of data operators, data processors. So the regulation does look at firms such as Data Barracks. One of the things that, for example, we do is we encrypt data at the point that it leaves the client location, and encryption, whilst not a panacea, is one of the best forms of defence when it comes to not only cyber crime, but also in terms of evidencing that you've done all that you could reasonably do if the regulator looks at a particular breach. If you've got well encrypted data that, whilst the data itself in the noughts and one format can't actually be read or mean anything to anybody. So, that's our view on how we can make sure that we comply.
Are we, just very briefly, are we in a bit of a no man's land at the moment? Because we know that the regulations are coming. You know what you're doing is to the best industry standard, but yet there will be still situations where we could have data that is either infected or breached. So the kind of people that are going to be out there, this hasn't been tried or tested by anybody yet, has it?
No, it hasn't. But then if you think about the fact that we already have the Data Protection Act, we've had that for quite a few years now. So as long as everybody has got their general data protection in order, the general data protection regulations are just a step up from that. So they should be able to manage general data protection regulation in addition to the data protection that they have at the moment. However, having said that, because the fines are going to go up enormously come May, there is going to be an issue with regard to compliance and the fact that the regulator is going to come down hard on anybody that has not tightened up their act.
All right, listen, we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. We're not trying to frighten you on this particular programme. What we're trying to do is we're trying to highlight maybe some of the issues that your organisation, maybe your business, and it's regardless of the size of your organisation or business for that matter, regardless of that, you are still going to be in a situation where you have got to be aware of this. And you will read a lot of press. There was an article on the BBC just a couple of weeks back on their news page that said, will GDPR bankrupt small businesses? Now, they're talking about the fines here. So more about that as the program continues on this edition of Business Connections Live. Well, we hope you're enjoying today's programme. It's fantastic. Two great guests in the studio today, Mike Osborne and also Linda Bazan. We're all talking about all things regarding cybersecurity and GDPR. We do hope you're enjoying today's programme. Don't forget, you can always leave a comment below on our Facebook page, or if you want, you can always email us as well. I'll give you the email addresses in just a few moments' time. And you can follow our train of thought or maybe even contact our two experts after the programme. Last week's show was an absolute cracker as well, for that matter. Thoroughly enjoyed that. A friend of mine joined us in the studio. He is one of the foremost speakers in the UK. He does a lot of after-dinner speaking. He was also the chairman of the Professional Speakers Association. It was a cracking show last week. We had Jeremy Nicholas. He's the director of Talking Toolbox, speaker and coach, and we were talking about how to make an impact with your communications. It was a really great show. There's some terrific advice nice on there. If you did miss the show last week, can I suggest you watch the programme in full? But just to give you a bit of a tease of what Jeremy said on last week's edition of Business Connections Live, here are the highlights. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing how to make an impact with your communication. What are you talking about? Joining me in the studio today is Jeremy Nicholas. He's the director of Talking Toolbox, speaker and coach, and all-round good guy as well.
So, BBC broadcaster for many years, started in local radio, then did national radio, then went to local telly, national telly, did lots of football commentating, lots of sports presenting, and then towards the end I did 10 years of what we call and finally news reporting, which is the skateboarding dog or the face of Elvis on a bit of cheese, that sort of thing. Not the stuff that leads the bulletin, they didn't trust me with that, but the funny bit at the end. So I think it's when people don't work out what they want to say, because they tend to do it in a chronological order. So they'll think, right, we better start by saying when we were founded. You know, so my business is 10 years old, but I wouldn't expect anyone to book me on the basis of that. Yes, we were looking for a 10-year-old business. Fantastic. Thank goodness you weren't just 8 years old, because we thought we can't be experienced enough. So, but everyone always shows you a picture of their headquarters building, how many employees they've got, how long they've been in business, and everyone goes, I really don't care. No, often people do get far too close to it, and then they start using phrases that only people right on the inside would know what they mean, and to the wider audience they've no idea what they're talking about. So people start using jargon all the time, and that alienates everyone in the room. But I think you've got to use the technique which I call the Vietnam technique. You know, any kind of Vietnam movie where some American Marines are in a clearing and one of them's been shot in the leg, and there's always this thing, a helicopter says, no one gets left behind, and then loads of Marines will land to save the one guy with the broken leg. 3 of them are killed, but they got the guy with the, yeah. And all the bodies come out as well, so it's fine because no one gets left behind. And I think that's a good message whenever you're presenting. Make sure no one gets left behind. Does everyone know who Dave is? If they don't, explain it. Don't use jargon. I saw somebody the other day talking about KPI. Yeah, we've had all these KPIs, and I thought, yes, I know that one. Key performance indicator. And then I went to an event the next week, and this chap saying, I just met this KPI. I thought, hang on.
What's a KPI?
You've met a KPI. And I was thinking, oh no, I'm just a bloke in the media. I thought that was key performance indicator, and I put my hand up and said, sorry, how can you meet a KPI? And he went, key person of influence. And I thought, you can't just make things up. And half the audience were going, I'm glad you asked that, because I didn't know that. I'm a professional speaker, and I work a lot with professional speakers, and often I'll advise them on their show reel because of my television background. They'll say, how long should the show reel be? And that, you know, most people will say about 5 minutes, and I will say, no, 2 minutes, absolute maximum. So I think the best thing is to have a lot of small, short videos, because if people then like that, then if you've got it set up properly on YouTube for automatically play something similar to this, and if you put exactly the same tags in all of yours, it will automatically then play another one of yours. Yeah. So collect stories, write them down, have them in your little book, and then just flick through and think, what can I use to illustrate that point? I do a workshop called corporate storytelling, and I say, right, what points do you want to make about your company? Right, what stories have you got about that?
Very good.
So this is just made out of wool, so I won't keep it on too much, but it's like a brain, and you can see it split into the 2 halves there. And then these are facts, and these are stories. Okay, so the facts are quite small and blue and boring, and they won't stick.
This is a fact. It's wrapped in emotion.
Yes, and it's now a story. That's it. And it sticks. People talk about death by PowerPoint. I don't necessarily think PowerPoint's a bad thing. It's just the way we use it. So what I would say is a good thing to do with PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever is lots of pictures. Forget all the graphs with about 8 different lines on. If you've got 8 different lines, have 8 different slides so that people can see what it is. And it's no good saying, can you see this at the back? No, it's a bit small, isn't it? If you know that, then sort it out earlier on. Hi, I'm Jeremy Nicholas. I'm the director of Talking Toolbox, and I teach companies how to be entertaining and engaging when pitching for business and speaking at events. My big thing is that you've got to start with an exciting bit, and everything that I've talked about on the programme is summed up in my book, which is called 1,000,000 Tips on Public Speaking, brackets volume 1, because there's not 1,000,000 tips in there, that's just to get out. And you can download it for free. It doesn't even cost you anything, on my website, which is my name, jeremynicholas.co.uk.
Jeremy Nichols there, and a fantastic show. If you get an opportunity, don't just watch the highlights, watch the entire programme. It really was a fascinating insight into how you can make your presentations a lot better. Just think of that idea, first of all, the big idea, remove all the whys and whatevers, just go for that big idea and really sell it straight away. So listen, good luck on your next major presentation when you're out there. And don't forget, if you're thinking to yourself, boy, I love the look of this, I would love a programme just like this one for my organisation. Maybe you'd like to have it branded, maybe you'd like to have a different studio set. Well, you can do that very simply by contacting us here at Business Connections Live. All you got to do is drop us an email to this address. It is studio@businessconnectionslive.com. And if you want, you can always pick the phone up, the old dog and bone, and you can talk to a real person, either be myself or, strange enough, either Linda Bazant as well. Telephone number is 01784, it's not that strange by the way, Linda. 01784 256 777 is our telephone number. You can get through to us and we'll discuss what could be possible for your organisation. Remember, if you're sending out a newsletter at the moment, why don't you turn your readers into viewers? There's nothing more compelling than a video. Say if Mike was to do a piece and he was sitting there and he was just a long written text, maybe 500 words about why you should be considering cybersecurity within your organisation, and then you were actually to hear Mike saying those words on video, it's a lot more compelling. So think about that for your organisation. Now, as I said, if you'd like more information on that, you can get in touch with us. If you want, also, you can follow our Train of Consciousness at BCL Business TV. You can also watch the programmes each and every week. There's over 250 hours on our Facebook page. There's the address on your screen right now. And if you do want to watch all the programmes absolutely free, you can go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com. You're watching Business Connections Live. Joining me in the studio today is Mike Osborne, Executive Chairman of Data Barracks, and we're talking about cybersecurity today. Also joining us is Linda Bazant, GDPR consultant from LRB Consult. Linda, I mean, I was kind of alluded to it earlier on, there's a lot of scaremongering going on with this at the moment. And you would say, wouldn't you, that it's important for businesses to be aware that they have their responsibilities. But really, is it that urgent a thing for businesses to be considering and doing?
Yes, it is urgent because the General Data Protection Regulation comes into force on the 25th of May. And the Information Commissioner's Office have said there will be no honeymoon period. They will start fining on the 26th. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going specifically for small businesses. And in actual fact, I spoke to the Information Commissioner's Office this morning and said that I was coming on the programme and asked for some clarification with regard to fines. Purely going back to what you said before about small businesses, the article in the newspaper that said, does that mean we're going to be making small businesses bankrupt? And they've come back to me and said that the working party at the Information Commissioner's Office is going to come out in December with a new set of guidance for administrative fees, because 20 million euros to people, especially with a small business, is terrifying. So I think that they're actually looking at the language and working on something for Christmas. Have
they given business and have they given themselves, in your opinion, enough time to get this in place for May of next year?
I don't think there's been enough awareness. We've known for a while that GDPR is coming in, but if you think of things like the auto-enrolment for pensions, there were television adverts about that. There's nothing on the television about that at the moment, nothing on the radio that I've heard. Yes, you've got articles in the newspaper talking about it, but there is nothing saying this is coming and this is what you have to do about it.
So, Mike, how do we get ready for this?
Obviously, awareness is one of those, and perhaps just to add, this isn't just about trying to hit a deadline of new regulation. Last year, 3.8 million cybercrimes were reported.
So this is going to be good for industry to do right now?
Absolutely. The estimated cost in the UK is £29 billion last year. So this is something that's costing business now. And coming back to my earlier point in terms of the trust of businesses, if you can evidence that you are cyber safe or as cyber safe as could be reasonably expected, then that's going to be good for the way in which you're seen by your customer base. It's going to be good by the way that you're seen from your insurers and advisors. So I think what's happening with the GDPR is they recognise that as we move towards a digital economy, they need firms to take it really seriously, because of the amount of costs that are involved. So I think it is a case of being aware that the regulations are coming in, but it's actually just best practice for firms to do.
Will there not be opportunities for insurance companies to protect people against this? Because obviously you're a third party, you're going to be working for other organisations. If I come to you and I think that your regulations, your own processes that you have are up to scratch, but they're not, then surely there must be some get out for me. Is there a get out for me as the person that's approaching you to do the job for me?
Well, the one thing that you need to be aware of is that when you've got obligations, and maybe for bigger companies, you've got the Companies Act, if you're regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, where there's around 45,000 smaller firms that fall under the auspices of the Financial Conduct Authority, you should actually be having a business continuity, disaster recovery and cyber plan anyway under those regulations.
But statistically across the UK, how many people do that, do you think?
Well, in my experience, there were only a few thousand firms that had contracted out for third-party disaster recovery and business continuity. So is the problem
absolutely huge then that's out there within industry?
So I think what you've got is at the very top end of industry, you've got actually firms that take it very seriously, are open to huge fines, and actually because of standards like the ISO 27001, which is a security standard, and the various regulations that exist for those firms, those have it pretty well done. However, in the UK, we're an SME-based economy. All of those bigger organisations absolutely are looking at the SME. The government in the last 12 or 18 months have said they want to place more business with SME firms. So the SME market in particular really has to grasp this and evidence that they are taking it seriously, that they've taken the right steps, and that they are safe to do business with. The insurance world isn't there to lose money. You know, the Lloyd's market is funded by, in the main, individuals and syndicates, and therefore, if the Lloyd's market think that to insure an organisation they're safe in doing so because ordinarily they won't have to pay out a claim, then clearly they'll offer insurance. If you haven't evidenced that, they're not going to insure you.
So if it is a high-risk market, it's going to be either very expensive or not available.
Absolutely. What
a frightening situation to find yourself in. At what size then does a business have to start thinking about this? Is the one-man band going to be needing services like what you provide? Are they going to need to be talking to you, Linda? The one-man band even. Is it? I mean, it sounds bizarre, but is it truly anybody that keeps any form of database or customer record that they really have to go through this entire process of making certain that they're secure? I mean, they're going to be doing it anyway to a certain level, but it just seems to be onerous on small business.
They're using your personal data. They've actually got it on their database and they could lose it to somebody else and cause you an issue, so yes.
Responsibility then. Okay, so we've got it. I'm a small business. What would be your recommendation to a small business? Where do I start? Who do I talk to? When do I know I really need this?
So you should know you need it anyway, and I guess for my two penn'orth worth, we're all individuals here. We've all got devices with personal information on, and therefore it's equally important to us as individuals to protect our data. The thing about business is the regulations apply to business, where obviously we're just individuals. But going back to the advice I would give is, don't confuse this as being an IT issue. And I think that's the big thing with cyber, because it's related to technology. People think they can talk to an IT organisation, or even if they're a medium-sized firm, look at their IT department and say, this is down to you to solve. If you're a business leader, if you're an MD or a CEO of a firm, the impact on your business through reputational damage, if you're losing client data, if you have to go out and tell people that you've lost the data and actually you weren't following best practice, that could be the difference between still operating in business or losing your business altogether.
But it does seem that the large organisations do seem to rough ride and get round this, don't we? We saw a large comms company last year. They had a breach of their data. They're still in business today. I don't know. They obviously would have been fined. But, I mean, the situation is that doesn't seem to have done their business
Well,
as much harm as I think it might have done.
So they lost a lot of customers at the time. The chief exec has now gone, who presided over that breach, and their share price over time has gone down significantly. So, you know, they have since been applauded actually by the government by saying how open they were to explain the circumstances of the breach. They didn't try and hide it.
But they were slow, weren't they?
They were slow, but in terms of the scope of what happened to them, it's not uncommon in that you recognise you've had a problem, but your techies have to go looking just to try and identify how big a problem it's been. Now, morally, do you say nothing until you know the full extent, or do you actually say, look, we've got a problem, but we don't know how big it is? And actually, under the regulation, Linda, I think there is a time limit, isn't there?
72 hours there will be from May.
And what are the consequences if... and this applies to everybody. So after
this applies
72
to everybody.
hours,
So if you know that there is a breach, you have 72 hours to report it to the Information Commissioner's office, and also possibly report it to the people who have been affected by the breach. And the rule of thumb here is it's not allowing you 72 hours to investigate it, like the organisation we were just talking about. It's not that it's not how the breach happened, but it's that you have a breach is what you're reporting. So within 72 hours, if you know you have a breach, you report you have a breach. You may not know what it is yet, you may not have investigated all of it yet, but within 72 hours, you must report that you have a breach.
let's look at another example then. That was talking about the communications company, the one we can name, of course, the NHS, who had a data security breach. Once again, we're talking ransomware. How does GDPR come into that at all? I mean, this is people that off island, off country, anonymous, using Bitcoin to hold an organisation to ransom. And an organisation like yours, how can you help somebody like the NHS to prevent something like this?
So, I mean, that's the key point. Prevention is better than
Because the big problem there was they were still running an old version of software.
In the main, it was old version of software. Now, there are different types of cybercrime. You can have indiscriminate attacks, which are just sending out lots and lots of malware or the emails that you click on something and it gets into your system, and they don't care whether it's the NHS or Steve Hyland that's opening them. They just go out to everybody. So those are as much to do with the people that you employ as it is to do with the systems that you patch. So obviously having your software up to date is an absolute must, as the NHS proved. But actually, if all of the employees within NHS could recognise what to look for in terms of a suspicious email, little tips and hints.
Was it delivered via email, that particular ransomware?
Yes. In terms of opening,
so once it was open
attachments.
because it exploited the deficiencies in Windows XP.
What a lot of these things look to do is to get inside the organisation as easy as it possibly can, and once it's in there, it can install software that then can be controlled outside by the cyber criminals, and that software then can be used to go and explore other weaknesses, but you're already through into the actual network itself at that point, which is why the training of your employees and for us as consumers is so important when it comes to cybercrime.
All right, we're going to come back to that a little bit more in just a few moments' time. So where do you start when it comes to the security within your business? Well, one of the places you can start, we've all got bad habits. I mean, how many of you who are watching this at the moment have got a password that you use everywhere? How many of you do that? Because it's easy to remember. There are some people that I talk to, what they have is they have two tiers of password. You've got the password that you use on websites that you only go to occasionally, the more generalistic ones, the ones that you feel or perceive aren't important, and then you have the important passwords, which are for the sites, of course, where, you know, bank account, bank balance, all those kind of things. Now, maybe one of the places that you can start when it comes to any of this is actually some form of password protection. Do you use one of the programs that's out there? We're going to ask Mike in just a moment what his recommendation would be. But interestingly, the Metropolitan Police have just launched a website. The Met launches cybercrime prevention. You just have a quick look at this on the screen now. Met launches cybercrime prevention video campaign, talking, in fact, about the whole area of passwords. In fact, there's a whole series of videos that are available on this website, looking at everything from phishing all the way through to password protection. Just to give you a bit of a taster of what we're talking about, this is from the Met Police website. Here's one of their videos on passwords.
Passwords are always a problem. We know they should be complicated to stop the hackers, but then we can't remember them. So we go for easy ones, which hackers just love. We live in a world where passwords have multiplied like rabbits. Passwords, PIN numbers, usernames. No brain, however big, can cope with what seems like millions of them. Criminals know that many of us choose passwords like password, or football, or QWERTY, or even a relative's name. The fact of the matter is, if a word is in a dictionary, then the hackers can crack your password in seconds, which means they can get their hands on your cash, your personal data, even pictures of you and your family, your entire life. But a good password locks them out. So it's worth taking the time to invent one that it'd take too much effort for criminals to crack. And actually, it's quite easy. Here's how. Choose 3 random words that you can remember, and a date that's easy to recall. Then put the words together. Maybe put the 19 at the front, the 95 at the end, and capitalize a letter from each word, for instance, the last one. Then bung in a couple of special characters, like an exclamation mark or an @ symbol or anything. Memorable and nigh on uncrackable. So, try something like this and make it work for you. Don't write it down, keep it in mind. Use it. Not this password. Create your own.
And you can go along to their website to find out more about that. It is the Met Launches Cybercrime Prevention Video Campaign. If you go to news.met.police.uk, news/Met Launches Cybercrime Prevention. It's a fantastic campaign. Just Google it, you'll go in there and there's a whole load of advice there. I must admit, the advice they give in that I actually find a little bit complicated and difficult because I'm a simple soul. But passwords is fundamentally where it starts, isn't it?
So when you look at the amount of crime last year that I talked about, 3.8 million of reported cybercrime, in the region of 2.4 million of that was theft from banking details. So that's where they've managed to hack either your PIN number that you need or your online password. So that's a big example, and it's thought that between £500 to £1,500 was the cost of each one of those hacks. So that perhaps brings it home in terms of the impact of passwords in a model digital economy.
We're all very used to using the likes of the different browsers that are on our different PCs and on our smartphones, and of course a lot of the time it says remember this site, remember this password. In your opinion, is that a big thumbs up or is that a big thumbs down?
It's a big thumbs down. So when I talked earlier about organisations getting a foothold within your IT, once they're in there, they go looking for stuff. So, you know,
so once they're in, that's the danger. You're giving them an open door, effectively.
Absolutely. Once they're in, and either you'll know they're in because you get a skull and crossbones and it's ransomware, or you won't know they're in and they're stealing stuff without you knowing. So, for example, there's something called a keylogger, which is as you're typing away, the keys that you're hitting and the website that you're on will be effectively being passed to the cyber criminals so that they can effectively recreate those keystrokes pretending to be you on that website. So anything that means you're not automatically storing passwords on the device that you're on, whether it be Windows, Android and iOS, is good cyber hygiene.
What about some of the packages that are available out there? For instance, we had a quick survey around the studio. We've got, which one's yours? Secure Bank, I think. It's one of our cameramen here, this Rolston. Yeah. Secure Bank, I've used that. We have LastPass. Are they a good idea?
Anything that encrypts, that needs more than a generic unlock key. So, for example, your fingerprint, or what's called two-factor authentication, whereby you ask to do something and it sends it to another device or another medium for you to say, yes, I really did this. Anything that's encrypted that would need some other form of confirmation that it's you, that would be what to use, as opposed to the bog standard operating system passwords.
Question to both of you: Are we making ourselves aware and doing too little too late? Has the horse truly bolted and the barn has burnt down, the farm has been shut, he's gone bankrupt? Are we just too far down the line for anything that we do now, be it with GDPR, data recovery, to be secure?
Well, perhaps if I give you an opinion, I don't think it is too far down the line. What we've had is a tremendous change. You know, I'm 49 now, and we only...
Don't look it.
Thank you. We've only had emails and PCs on the desks, really, for the last 20 years of my working life. And 20 years, is no time at all, really, when you look at economies and how they evolve. So we've had absolutely massive adoption of technology. Why? Because it was easy, it gets cheap to do, and therefore you adopt it. Having adopted that technology, what we now appreciate is you also have risks whenever you take on something new, and we haven't been aware enough of the risks really until some of the headline infections that have happened, I think in this country, particularly the NHS.
I suppose that's what I meant. Are we slightly blasé a little bit with the data?
We're trusting. That's the trouble. We've been trusting it for too long, and it's only been really recently, with all of the ransomware and the security breaches and so on that are coming to the fore, that we're suddenly stepping back and thinking, oh, hang on a second, because I need to take a second look at this. There
seems to be two areas, isn't it? There's the area of convenience, and then there's the area of security. For instance, I have a 1 terabit drive sitting here on the desk next to me that can fit into my pocket. Can we just have a look at that? I mean, we've all got these. I must have 8 of these lying around, and they're getting bigger and bigger. This is 1 terabit, but you can get 3 and 4 terabit drives that can fit into the palm of your hand. Is that the danger? Is it because everything is being miniaturized, everything is getting smaller, that people feel that we can... My first PC was 20 gig, and that was a big hard drive. Here, this is a 1 terabit drive. The difference is phenomenal. The amount of data we can carry around, that's what's so frightening, is it?
It is frightening. If you think about what you can now get on a laptop and the amount of information you can carry around, and particularly where you have government laptops or Ministry of Defence laptops that go missing, large corporations where you've got marketing staff that have got lots of information. You're walking around with laptops which have got information on that going back maybe 20 years would have only resided on a mainframe in a very secure data centre, accessed by a handful of people without lots of global network connectivity. Our problem is we want to be online seamlessly on any device, anywhere, anytime, and that means the accessibility to data has to be always on.
Now, the government are talking, obviously, with GDPR, so we've got that coming, but they're also working on the other side of the fence as well, aren't they, as when it comes to the defence of this. And we've got the Cyber Essentials scheme, which is an initiative from the government as well. Just tell us a little bit about that.
So what Cyber Essentials has been designed to do is to give people in small, medium firms a guide, a checklist for them to reflect upon the best standards that exist for cybersecurity. And it introduces issues such as security patching from a technology point of view, perimeter defence such as firewalls, mail scanning, the issue of backup, etc. So it's initially a self-assessment questionnaire that can be done online, that you then send off to an authorised Cyber Essentials partner. And for about £300 for a standard self-assessment, you'll get a view as to how far you're away from the best practice.
I actually got some of the documents here. This is some of the documents that are coming out in line with the scheme, Cyber Essentials, the summary, the requirement for basic technical protection from cyber attacks, and also the assurance framework. It's all very well that all this is going out there. Linda, how do we improve staff awareness then? How do we go about making certain that our staff are aware of what the responsibilities are, what the company is trying to achieve?
Well, we've actually obviously got to look at staff training, but unlike when the original Data Protection Act came out in 1998, staff were being trained using manuals. And you did the training and they went away with their manual and they said, "Thank you very much," and they put it in the drawer. And that was the last time they saw it. Whereas now everything is online, and what the government is saying is that this has got to be, you've got to live, eat and breathe data protection and cybersecurity in the same way that health and safety regulations now are part of everyday life in any business, and this has to be at the core of it as well, which means that it's got to come from the top.
But I'm busy running a company, so does this mean I've now got to employ someone within my organisation to, I mean, we've talked about the data controllers in organisations in the past, but is this now an additional job for them to do, or is this another position?
The bigger companies will employ a data protection officer. Some have to do it because it's the law, public authorities and so on, but some bigger companies will do it because they are so big and it makes sense for them to do that. You don't have to have a specific person in your organisation that you promote to just that. Dependent on the size of your organisation, it could be someone that is responsible for that in addition to other things. So it may well be that they are responsible for IT security and data protection. It depends on the size of your business. But as the owner of that business, the buck stops there. It's your responsibility to make sure that it happens.
So if I'm approaching you then, Mike, and I'm talking to your organisation to actually to back up my data, is that a role then potentially that you guys could do?
Yeah, so we traditionally have been in what was called the disaster recovery as a service marketplace, whereby we will ensure that your backups are taken from site every night, encrypted before they leave, and stored securely, in our case in a nuclear bunker. So that's been our heritage. Over the last 12 months we've launched Cyber DR as a service, which includes cyber awareness training for staff and a review of the architecture of the firms that we support to make sure that things like the firewalls are up to speed, the operating systems that are being in use are patched, and essentially the advice from the Cyber Essentials scheme. Data Barracks was actually one of the first to go the next step, which is Cyber Essentials Plus, where you actually have an external audit come through to make sure that over and above a self-assessment, an external firm has said that you're operating to best practice. And we use our experience from that audit to provide advice and guidance to firms, so that not only have they got cyber essentials, but they've also got a get out of jail card with the backups that we do for them on a nightly basis.
Let me ask you, maybe I've asked it already and I've forgotten, but is there an industry-wide naivety there at the moment? Do people just don't realise it's coming? Is there's the old joke, isn't it? The light at the end of the tunnel may well be a steam train coming in the other direction. Are we waiting for disaster at the moment? Is this going to go a bit peaked on?
I think the NHS was a wake-up call, to be honest with you. I think clearly the government had plans in place because they wouldn't have announced £1.9 billion worth of funding as a knee-jerk. You know, they have recognised the scale of the potential risk, not only financially but to the economy as a whole. But I agree with Linda, compared to, for example, the Millennium Bug advertising, where we were actually getting leaflets dropped to the home address.
Yes.
We're not seeing anything of that. There's a lot on business sites, so LinkedIn, you know, GDPR is every other post that you see on LinkedIn, but actually outside of that, I'm not seeing the level of awareness that I saw for the Millennium Bug.
No, and I think for small businesses, if they are a member of their local Chamber of Commerce or a local business forum, they're going to find out through that. But if there are small businesses that is not a member of any kind of organisation, they have no idea that this even exists.
It's interesting, I was talking to a company the other week and they were telling me that they've been working on it for a year and a half to be in the right position.
And some companies have.
You've put together a series of short videos just reminding people on the keynotes. One of them we're going to show in just a moment. What's this one about?
This one is about data breach, which we spoke about earlier.
And once again, just give us a summary of why it's so important.
It's for serious breaches and the 72-hour period that you have to notify a breach to the Information Commissioner's Office. Whether you know why the breach happened or not, you have 72 hours to report that it's a serious breach and could affect individual people's personal data.
It is a part of a series of, I think, 16 or so individual videos that Linda's put together. They really are top line highlighting exactly the things that you need to remember about GDPR in particular. Just to give you an example, you can sign up for these. They'll be sent to you simply. Got to put sign up, triple signed up, quadruply signed up. You know, you've got to be certain these days.
Unambiguous.
Yes. So there's, you know, it's been all done properly. Have a look at this, and if you're interested, you'll find the link to the site on either the web page on YouTube, or you'll find it on iTunes, or you'll find it on Facebook. We'll put the link out there so that you can sign up for it and get more information concerning GDPR. Have a look at this.
Hello, I'm Linda Bazant. Today we look at GDPR and personal data breaches. GDPR introduces mandatory breach notifications, which are likely to result in an individual suffering damage to the Data Protection Authority and in some cases to the affected individuals. Even though not all breaches will be subject to mandatory notification, you will still be under an obligation to have systems in place to detect and investigate all breaches and record them in an internal breach register. There is a time limit for reporting a breach under the mandatory rules. Non-compliance can lead to administrative fines of up to 10 million euros, or, in the case of an undertaking, up to 2% of the total worldwide annual turnover of the preceding financial year, whichever is the higher. If you have any questions on GDPR and how it could affect your business, then please contact me at brexit@lindabazant.com.
There we go, and there's a whole series of those. I mean, interesting, we were talking about CRMs and things like that, and of course there is a complete issue around where the responsibility finishes. And you were saying that you cannot outsource your business's responsibilities concerning GDPR to a third party.
And data protection. Yeah, so whether it be a CRM that sits in the cloud, or if you've gone to a third party service provider and they suffer a breach, ultimately you're responsible for your data, and you can't say it wasn't me, Gov, they made the mistake. There might be mitigating circumstances, and the way in which you've worked with the outsourcer to make sure that they follow best practice could all mean that the regulator says we're not going to fine you, but equally there's no guarantee that they won't. You can't pass the blame to an outsourcer. There's actually a phrase called material outsourcer within a lot of the regulators' handbooks, and that should put a big alert light if ever you're classified as a material outsourcer.
Let's just go down the forms, and you may not be familiar with how your data can be breached, how people will get in there. We've kind of talked on the top level really to a certain extent about it, but just to remind everybody, you've got a list there of the key different ways that people can have their data infringed upon.
I think we've talked about a lack of awareness, and I guess a lack of awareness around the regulations is one thing, but not everyone is a super techie. And coming down on the train this morning, I saw a couple on the other side of the table trying to work out what they were doing on their notepad. It's really convenient because they're coming to London and they can access data, but they were about to log on to a public free Wi-Fi on the train on the way down here. So if I start with that as an example, any public Wi-Fi that you're access to, if you've got the right software, you can actually look at the types of data that are sitting on that network. Now, you've heard of cookies. When you go onto a website and it says we'll accept cookies, yes, no. A cookie tells an organisation that you've been there before. It tells them something about you. So actually, if you're on a public Wi-Fi, people can start to scrape for cookies, and they could store the cookie, go onto a website, and if that website recognises the cookie as someone else because you've stolen it, you're part way down the line there into kidding the organisation that you're someone that you're not. So public Wi-Fi connections really quite scary when you look into some of the details. There's something called spoofing. So have you ever received an email from yourself?
Yes.
And you think, I haven't sent that email. Now, the from bit is something that's easy to change when you send out an email. So all that's happening there is they've got a program that is sending an email, which is a malware. It's got some bad stuff in it, and it's saying send it to this person, and the from is from that person. Now, how many times do you open an email from yourself? You shouldn't, should you? Because you know you haven't sent it. But if they're sending it from Mike Osborne to thousands of people, some of whom might know me, they might say, I've had an email from Mike, and it says, would I just check this document that he's going onto the TV, and does it make sense? I'll open that Word document or the spreadsheet, and lo and behold, that spreadsheet has got what's called an executable in it that is all of a sudden in your PC or in your device, and it sends a little message to the bad guys to say, I'm in, what do you want me to do? Now, the big tip on spoofing is if you go to the actual person's name that has sent it, if you click on that, or sometimes you have to double click on it depending upon what device you're on, it will actually give you the name of the person.
Of where it came from.
Where it came from. So if ever you're looking at something you think this is a bit weird, it's from HSBC but they can't spell very well and the logo looks a bit hazy, click on HSBC banking on the email address or double click on it and you'll probably find it comes up with a string of nonsense. That's one of the easiest ways. It's not the only way, it's not cast iron, but it's one of the easy ways of spotting a spoof email.
So that's spoofing. What else have we got out there? Because everybody's heard of phishing, but there's now one called whaling.
Okay, so very quickly, phishing is where you're pretending to be another organisation. So we've all had the HSBC or the Lloyds Bank or the Barclays Bank email that says, we've upgraded our system, you've got 72 hours to change your details, otherwise, we're going to close your account down. No bank would ever do that. No bank would ever ask you to click on something in an email to log on. So that's another giveaway. But they're getting very, very clever at clicking on to something that takes you to a website that looks almost identical to the proper website, but it's not. They're using it to scrape information from you in terms of your log on, your passwords, etc. So that's what they do there. Now then, with whaling, you're looking at larger individuals, directors. You're smiling at me.
Well, no.
So directors, chief executive officers, etc., where the potential prize could be huge. So, for example, there was a case where an MD had been into court. He was counterclaiming a particular issue, and it hit the headlines. That MD then received an email from someone saying, actually, I'm now lodging a claim. I've been following the case and I believe I had a valid case. Please find attached my claim. And you double click on that claim and all of a sudden on the MD's device, you've now opened up whatever the malware was. Now, the MD might know it's happened or he might not. But all of a sudden, you're not only into the organisation, but you're into a whale, you're into the MD.
You're into the MD.
Now then, if you could create an email, because we've just talked about spoofing, from the MD to the accounts payable department, including an invoice, to say, please pay this invoice on my say-so. Unless there's checks and balances within the organisations, you've just managed to get potentially a significant amount of money from an organisation because the MD told you to.
I hope you just haven't set up a fantastic plan. We'll be trying that later. Okay, so that's whaling. What else have we got? Very briefly, what are the others?
So you've got obviously ransomware. Now, previously, all of this malware stuff, you've had to have some intelligence behind trying to get some form of end result, looking around a system, finding something, making some money that way. With ransomware, really all you're doing is saying we will encrypt your data. We will encrypt your data and therefore you cannot access anything. And because you cannot access anything, basically your organisation grinds to a halt. And unless you pay me some money, and actually there's no guarantee that even if you were able to pay money that you'd be able to unencrypt the files. So it's even a leap of faith if you were to pay, which isn't the recommendation. Then you can't access your information. So ransomware has been an indiscriminate approach that doesn't need the intelligence that previous cybercrime required.
Last question then. How do you recover infected systems using backup? How do you go about doing that? Is that a short answer or a long answer? I don't mind extending the programme because it's fascinating.
So the first thing is you've got to have a backup, and you'd be surprised how many firms don't take backup seriously. I've been in the industry 30 years. We always encourage clients to test, and over the years only around 50% of clients have ever actually tested, and the amount of those clients when they test realise that they can't do a full recovery because they've missed part of the backup that they didn't realise they needed to, or the tape that they've bought is faulty, or the disk drive that they've got the data on doesn't read anymore because it's been switched off for a period of time.
Got the t-shirt.
So it's not uncommon. So the first thing is you have to have a backup, and you have to make sure that you have a viable backup. Now, do you back up daily? Do you back up weekly? Do you do it monthly? Do you do it every year? Because the period between each backup represents how much data you could lose. So if you don't back up nightly and you do loads of work in a dynamic organisation and you have a cyber attack and you say, I'm not going to pay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to wipe down all of the systems, disconnect everything, take everything back to bare metal, start to recover, you can only recover from the last valid backup that you've got. But as long as you've got that valid backup, the ability to say to ransomware and cyber criminals no, and go through a whole process of cleaning every single device on the network, it's not an easy task, and we have actually seen some very large organisations over this last few months be impacted and have to say, look, it's taken us a while. Merck's Shipping declared that they were going to have to put, I think, $300 million to one side, and they'd actually got tankers sat outside ports because their systems couldn't bring them into port safely.
Is there a recommendation then that you would say, do you back up? Sounds to me that you back up every hour. I mean, incremental backup, isn't that?
Yeah, so one thing that you have to always think about when you're doing backups is backup does have an impact on the actual systems. So when you're already writing information because it's a live system, to then try and take a backup, you can't do it willy-nilly. You have to think it through. But what we're starting to see now is what's called replication, which is where you are backing up everything instantaneously. You can take that to a second set, and then you can do a backup of that second set without necessarily impact on the primary. So we're getting more and more sophisticated to be able to do replication and backups far quicker and far cheaper than we've ever been able to do. But it is the one get out of jail card for ransomware.
Listen, it's hard to believe it, but the hour is nearly up. In fact, it was up quite some time ago, so we'll just continue on a little bit. Really what I'm after is a kind of a summary so that our viewers who are watching this are in a position so that they understand the important things that they need to be doing today, so that A, they're going to be prepared for May of next year, and B, that they understand that regardless of whether that regulation was coming in or not next year, that their data is secure and that their business can continue, so that they have some continuity. So if that's okay with both of you, I just needed to say who you are and where you're from. Linda, do you want to go first, or shall I ask Mike?
Let Mike go first.
Let Mike go first.
Mine
All
will
right. Mike,
dovetail into what
you're
Mike
straight
says.
down camera number one, in fact. So if you say who you are and where you're from, that'd be great.
I'm Mike Osborne. I'm the Executive Chairman of Data Barracks. At Data Barracks, we're passionate about data protection, disaster recovery, and helping small, medium firms recover in the event of a cyber attack. We're taking free tools, putting them on our databarracks.com website to provide information and support to organisations, and then of course helping those organisations if they need more than that's available on site.
Thank you very much. That's good. And Linda, the key things for people to remember: who you are, where you're from. Straight down camera number 4.
Linda Bazant, LRB Consult, GDPR Specialist, Speaker and Trainer. What we've been talking about today is cybersecurity and its dovetail into GDPR. One of the things we've been talking about is breach, and the most important thing with GDPR, which will come into force on the 25th of May, is that if you have a serious breach, it's very important that you report that breach to the Information Commissioner's Office within 72 hours of knowledge of the breach. So it's not allowing you 72 hours to investigate the breach and come up with the reason why you had that breach. It's just to say that you have had that breach, because it may well be that the people who are affected by that breach also need to be informed as quickly as possible.
Listen, the pair of you, it's been a fascinating programme. I think the thing about it is it just seems to be such a huge subject. If we may, I think on a regular basis, if we can get together, see how things progress, how things move forward over the coming months, what businesses should be doing, what procedures they should be put in place, what processes should be going into place as well, and maybe talk again a little bit more on specific areas. On, for instance, let's talk about an entire programme on what to expect from an organisation like yours for the backups. Mm-hmm. What do you get? What kind of backup am I looking at? What's the technology that's needed? What are the costs that would be associated with that? And Linda, from your point of view, you come back on the programme and we talk a little bit more about processes, once again, procedures that need to go in place, staff training, and what we need to be considering when it comes to GDPR.
And especially with the guidance coming out of the Information Commissioner's Office on a regular basis and being updated, I think it's important that we keep in touch. Can
I thank the pair of you very, very much indeed for coming in. It's a big topic, and we could honestly talk for a couple of hours. And I hope you found today's programme a bit of an insight into this. I suppose the thing to do is, let's not worry about it, let's not panic about it, but let's do something about it. Let's put the procedures and the processes in place within our organisations so that we are prepared for it. We've got May of next year. If you're already covering the general data protection regulation, general data protection regulations, then you're halfway there. The GDPR, when it starts in May of next year, as I said, they aren't taking any prisoners when it comes to that next year. Listen, once again, Linda and Mike, thank you very much indeed for being our guests on this edition of Business Connections Live, and we do hope you've enjoyed today's programme. Let me give you a bit of an update on who's coming on the programmes in the future. On next week's programme, we've got Caleb Storkey, he's going to be on the programme. Jerry Brown, the customer lifeguard, is back on the show. A great guy, Michael Dodd's going to be joining us on the programme as well. Gillian Ponan is going to be on the programme. She's been on before. You may have seen her, in fact, on Dragon's Den just a little while back. That's all because she was on the show. Well, that's what I'm telling myself. And also entrepreneur and a fantastic speaker as well, Warren Knight, will be on the programme as well. But that practically wraps up today's show. Listen, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we look forward to your company. Don't forget, we are live each and every Monday at 12 noon, but until we do it all again, please don't forget, do join us here at Business Connections Live. Have a successful week. Bye for now. Bye-bye.